You're live.
Thank you. So, welcome everyone to our FBS chat. Today we have the lovely Emma Burns from New Zealand joining us and doing some fascinating work, which I'm sure we'll get to later on. Initially, we always like to ask our guests, Emma, how they came across the solution-focused approach. Is it something you always use? Is it something you sort of just came across and thought this is the right thing for me? So how did you come across the approach initially?
Well, actually, being a psychologist at all was a bit of an accident for me. I went to uni to study genetics, and I was short of about 4 credits for my first year. So I took all the science papers, and then I needed one more paper. So psychology looked like the least boring of all the other options. So I just took it as a bit of a fill-in. And then in my second year, I just got really sick of looking down a microscope. Really enjoyed psychology, so I changed my major, but trained kind of in CBT and really problem-focused models. Did that for about 15 years. Never really felt comfortable with it. Never felt comfortable with the expert position. Never felt, it just didn't really feel like the way I wanted to be with people, but that was all I knew. So then 2011 came along. I went to a one-day training in Napier by Michael Durant. I'd never heard of solution focus, didn't know anything about it. Like I joke about, but which is actually true. I only went to it because it was held at a restaurant with really good food. So I kind of honestly went for the lunch, but thought if I learned something, that'd be a bonus. So I went along that day, and yeah, my whole life changed really from that one day of hearing something that just to me made so much sense and seemed so simple. And I just couldn't understand why I'd never heard of it before. So kind of sat in that training, really excited, because I found like, wow, this is something I want to learn more about, but also really skeptical because I thought, is this a bit too easy and would it work for difficult stuff? So figured the only way I was going to know is to try it, and the rest is kind of history.
So the fact that you were 4 credits short and you liked the lunch is kind of was the motivating driver, and it changed your practice from there on in.
Yeah, completely changed. Yeah.
So when you left uni, where were you working? What sort of clients were you dealing with at that time?
My first job was in the inpatient mental health unit here. So acute mental health clients, but also there was a adjoining unit which were for more chronic patients. And I remember being really fascinated by them and curious about, what happened for them to end up as they were at that point, which was really kind of not that functional. And I remember kneeling down in the file room, actually looking at their very first files for those people when they'd first come into mental health care. And I remember being really, really confused because almost without exception, they'd all had like a trauma or a grief or something, like an adverse life event. And I remember sitting in that room thinking, why didn't they just get supportive counselling? Why did they get medicated? Why did all this happen to them? And I guess that was the beginning of me really questioning the models that I'd been taught. And I guess it was the beginning of a journey which kind of led me to looking for something else, but didn't really know what that was until I went to that training in Napier. Yeah.
So after the training, what changed with your clients? What did your clients know? Oh, Emma's done something different here.
Well, they just noticed different questions, completely different questions. I think one of the biggest changes for me was that I used to have families I'd visit, and I feel really bad to say this now, but I would go and do a visit and I'd knock on the door and I would honestly be praying that they went home.
Mm,
And that was nothing about them. That was about me, because I know I would leave those visits feeling like I hadn't done anything that was helpful. And I'd go away feeling like I haven't helped them, I haven't been useful, I haven't made a difference. And I mean, I didn't, although I got into this profession kind of by accident, I didn't get into it to be useless and not help people. So it was a really horrible feeling. And
mm,
so one of the things I noticed was I just always looked forward to the visit, even though some of the cases were quite tough. I
mm.
knew that it was going to be an enjoyable conversation. I knew I'd be able to leave and people would be smiling, not just because I was leaving, hopefully, but because it had been a helpful conversation. And people, you could see people shifting and moving forward, and it just gave me a newfound love for the work I was doing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds like it was really helpful for you as a practitioner because, like you say, when you began to knock on the door, you were looking forward, and that must have
Yeah.
come across to your clients.
Yeah, and I think a lot of them I remember saying, being quite confused by the different questions.
Mm,
Um, but even the new cases that hadn't known me before I learned this, they often would say, "You ask some really strange questions," or "We've never been asked this before," and but which led to a conversation in itself of, no one's actually ever asked us what we want, or
mm,
um, people have just come in and told us what to do,
mm,
and people felt judged and not respected. And I think for me, that was one of the things I love so much, is that people feel respected as humans.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, brilliant. And I guess less stressful for you in a way, not having to deal with a lot of the underlying psychological issues and problems.
Oh, heck yeah, because I mean, there was always that expectation previously that you'd have
Mm,
to fix people or solve their problems for them or have this magic answer or this incredible, somehow you had this insight or understanding that you'd utter these words and their lives would be transformed, and you just can't do that.
mm,
And so it takes the pressure off. One thing I remember hearing, I can't remember who said it, but it was that you should never be working harder than your client is.
mm,
And I think one thing that changed for me too was that that whole getting rid of that sense of resistance that people used to talk about. Because I was imposing stuff on people, and I was going to visit kind of having decided what we were going to talk about. And I look back on that now and I think, yeah, how arrogant that way of working is, where you kind of go in and you decide what the conversation is going to look like or what the subject's going to be. And yeah, it's like another life to me now, looking back on that.
yeah, yeah. And were you the only therapist in your organisation using the approach?
Yeah, well, I was the only therapist in the organisation, full stop, because I was already working for police by then. So
Oh,
I'd been with police for a year when I came across Solution Focus. So for the first year I was with police, I was still writing the long assessment reports, and everyone thought I was so clever because I, write these great big long reports. Um, but yeah, then it changed, and I'm very, very lucky, because I think if I had been working anywhere else, it would have been a lot more difficult to use this. And I've been fortunate with police. I have heaps of autonomy, so I can do the job in the way that I think is the best way to do it. And so
mm,
I'm really, really mindful that if I'd been working in probably any of my previous jobs, it would have been more of a battle to be able to
mm,
have as much flexibility as I do have.
mm. So
Yeah.
how did you? I mean, why are the police in New Zealand taking on solution focused therapists? Because I guess for me, when I think of a psychologist with the police force, it's someone who's looking at a criminal and trying to understand why they've done what they've done. But yours sounds like more of a supportive role.
Yeah. So I think what happened was in 2010, there was some funding from the government through this thing called the Fresh Start initiative. So they were looking at police employing, or they were meant to be social work positions. And so working with child offenders, and the purpose of that was to, intervene early, identify these young people as early as possible, and try and work with them so that they would, instead of going down the pathway of ending up in youth court and then, prison when they're older, to get them onto a better path. And so the purpose of those roles, and there was initially 4, I think, in New Zealand, and I was one of the first 4, and then they've rolled it out. It's more of because police here use a prevention first model, so it's about how can we prevent crime, and one of the biggest opportunities that they saw was working with kids who were starting to get into offending, and that sort of stuff. So get with them early and try and guide them onto a different future.
Yeah. And would that involve working with the young people and their families?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And a lot of it too was with the schools. I think I was lucky because I'd previously worked in education in our Ministry of Education, and so I had a lot of good relationships with schools and different agencies that were relevant for young people anyway. So I was able to kind of leverage off some of those connections and some of those relationships. And so what it actually meant was that I would have a lot of referrals, although the job was initially meant to be all referrals came from police. So kids who'd come to police notice, I ended up getting quite a few referrals from schools or social workers in schools who knew that these kids were getting into mischief, but perhaps hadn't been caught by police at that point. So it made it even earlier to identify them and work with them. So it was a real big bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how's so it developed into, obviously, it sounds like a very early prevention model. So working with young people that first came to notice, but then going even a step further back, schools identifying maybe young children who are acting out or behaving in a way that they may have suspected, like you say, that they may have been in that system but not got caught yet. So doing even that work. So what work? Because I know we heard you on the SF 24 hour, and it was fascinating.
Very fascinating.
Yeah. Tell us about the work you do in the police station with the guys in the cells.
So that was another accident. I had been in lots of accidents. So I had been, or unplanned things. So I had been in a 12-month advisory role until June this year. So that was really around teaching staff their solution-focused approach, anyone who was interested, across work groups. And I happened to be doing a training session with the custody sergeant at home, and real basic, just 1.5 hour session of just really introductory stuff. And during that session, a couple of them had made the comment that they would like to engage with the prisoners, as they're called, but they're too busy. They haven't got time. So I just, for some reason, just blurted out, "Oh, I'll do it." And then I thought, "Oh my God, what have I just said?" But they were quite keen for that idea, because just all of a sudden, you sometimes you don't really realise the opportunities you're missing. And I just thought, we're missing a huge opportunity, because these people are literally captive audience. And, often they're in the cells for the whole of the weekend. There's a huge amount of time for them to just think about things in a real negative way, probably. And we're not even taking the opportunity to talk to them. I don't think it's really ever occurred to anybody that we could or should be talking to them. And so I went back to my boss, and it was really fortunate because there obviously had been some background conversation in management around the fact that, you know, police are very victim focused. We do a lot of work for victims. There's a lot of services here for victims, and particularly in the family harm space where I mostly work, whenever there's a family harm incident, the focus is very much on finding support for the victim, which is great. They absolutely need it, but there's almost nothing for offenders, and I don't think people even think that. I think sometimes people don't even think they deserve it. There's very much, you know, bad guy, good guy, and if you're the offender, there's a sense of judgment sometimes, and they're not worth it, they're too hard. And so some of this has been actually trying to shift that mindset around how we look at people. And so it came at a good time because there was an appetite, I guess, for trying something out. And so initially that was a 3-week pilot, going in on a Sunday to talk to people, and it was very experimental. I didn't really know what I was doing. I had quite low expectations because research seemed to indicate that there wasn't likely to be a really big uptake. So I went in with just thinking, well, I'll just give it a go, and it just blew me away. I think I came home that first day, and every single person who I'd offered a conversation to had been really keen. And I know that that's boring as in the cells, and so they probably almost talk to anybody, but they were really genuine conversations, and I was really amazed. And to this day, I still am amazed every time I talk to someone how deeply they go into their life story. I don't ask them anything in particular, really. I mean, the whole thing is just introduced by me saying, you know, I'm here if anyone wants to have a conversation about, you know, what might be different when you go home. And if this was to be the last time you ever come into here, what would have happened? What would have been different? And so it's extremely vague. But I honestly believe if I tried it 10 years ago, and gone in and said, you know, I'm here to talk about your offending, or I'm here to talk about your drug use, they'd all just tell me to go away in some uncertain terms. So, so I honestly believe I would not have had the response I've had if I'd used a different model, because they determine what the conversation's about, and it's about what they want to talk about. And it's been, like, I think I've said it before, it's the most rewarding thing I've done in my whole career by a long way. And just the emotion, people get really emotional. They talk about, you know, their stories, and I think I get the sense that a lot of them, they don't get a lot of empathy from people, and they don't get listened to, and it's been really amazing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like you were saying, I think the work with offenders, if we get it right, eventually will lead to a lot less victims. So
Mm.
it makes sense to work that way.
Yeah, because truly that's prevention. Prevention
Mm.
is working with offenders really more than with victims, because by the time you've got a victim, something's happened.
Yeah.
So, and it's also about, I think, recognizing that a lot of couples or families, they want to stay together, and it's pointless trying to work against people and tell people you need to separate, or you can't see each other, because they're just going to find sneaky ways of doing it anyway. So we may as well just work with what people want, rather than trying to impose stuff
Mm.
on them that we really don't have the right to impose.
Mm. And I mean, I mean, it must have been quite, when you first did it, you must have thought, oh my God, are they going to want to talk to me? Are they going to see me as part of the establishment? You know, who's this? What's she trying to get out of me? But you found that they were all willing to have that conversation, even if, I mean, because I can imagine being locked up in a cell, not being in the happiest of moods.
Mm.
So,
No, not at all. And like I said, I set my expectations low, and that was really if one person would talk to me, and if no one tried to knock me out, that was going to be a good day. So I really didn't expect much, because I thought, like I've said before, I think it's in any circumstances, it's actually, we take it for granted that people want to talk to us, and it's actually a real privilege and something I don't take for granted, that anyone actually wants to talk to me and share their life, because it's a big deal, really, opening up to someone. And often these, well, I shouldn't say these people, because they're just people, but often people don't have a lot of trust, and they've been let down by services before. So even for them to stand up and hop off their bed and come out, I mean, for me, that's, I guess, the first sign that they've got some hope, that it's going to be helpful for them, or might make a difference for them in some way. Yeah.
brilliant. And when you speak to the people in the cells, how much of what they've done do you know before you go in, or are you just going in?
I deliberately try to not know very much at all. I mean, I could easily go in on Sunday morning, and I mean, the first thing I do is look at who's in the custody area, and all I really look at is if they're in there for family harm related things, because that's what I'm supposed to be focusing on. So if I know, as long as I know that it's family harm related, or I can kind of swing it that they maybe once had a family harm incident.
But it
So,
could be family harm related.
yeah, then I could easily sit there and trawl through their history and look at it in great detail, but I choose not to, because I've learnt along the way that the less I know, the better. Because I want to walk over to the custody area really excited. I don't want to walk over feeling nervous, or that sense of, oh, this is going to be too hard, because look at their history. And so I don't know anything about them.
Yeah.
And they often ask me, do you know, have you looked at my history? And I say no. And they're quite confused by that. But I say to them, I can't, your history is your history. We can't change any of your history. This is about your future and going forward from here. So, yeah. And I sometimes come back, and then when I'm putting the notes in, I do see their history, and I would never have picked it, because I just get to know them as people, and that's what I like, because it's just person to person.
And it means that you're more curious then, because you're working almost with a blank screen.
Yeah, and it's you're working with their reality and their story and their aspirations and their hopes and dreams and all that.
So, so I'm guessing these guys in the cells, or females in the cells, could be any age. It's not young people now, or is it still a
No,
certain age group?
they're mostly between about 20 and 40. I mean, they can be any age. I have talked to one young person. I think he was about 16. That's the only young person I've seen. And obviously, they can be any age. But it seems to be the majority of them are between about 20 and 40. And it's week by week, it's different. I mean, last week, they were mostly European, whereas usually it's mostly Maori. And some weeks you can have a lot of females in there, and other weeks there may not be many. So it's really variable.
Yeah. So in terms of, is there any follow-up, or is it
Yeah.
just the conversation?
Well, so initially the first 3 weeks were really around just seeing whether it was worthwhile doing, whether anyone would be interested. And so after that 3 weeks, well, then we had COVID hit, and so that was all pulled for a while. And then there was uncertainty about whether they'd continue it, and I really pushed it. I thought, I don't really fight for too much, but I just really believed in this possibility and the potential of this work, and so I just kept harassing and annoying people, I suppose. And so I started back again in maybe early June when we came out of lockdown here. And so from there, it's sort of become more around, rather than trying to talk to everybody, try to narrow it down a little bit but then do follow-up work with them. And so that's been really cool. And also the other thing is, which is starting now, is a bit more liaison with the prison, because sometimes after they go to court, they'll be remanded in custody. And so I happened to know one of the case managers at the prison, because he'd come to a suicide prevention session. And so I talked to him about, how do I carry on having contact with people if they're in prison. And so we got talking around, doing some training with the case managers out there and working alongside them so that the conversations that start in cells can be carried on when they're out there. It's been really cool, and I've done a couple of visits to people while they're out there. And one young guy, it was just hilarious. I don't always ask the miracle question, but with this particular guy I don't know why, it just seemed like it was going to be the right question. And when I saw him in prison, which was maybe 2 weeks after I'd seen him in the cells, he said to me, he goes, "Oh, I've been asking everyone that miracle question, and I've been telling them they need to think about their futures." And so I was like, "Oh, hilarious." He was kind of like SFing all his mates out there. So it was quite funny.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So he's spreading the word for you.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So in terms of, because it sounds like you love a new challenge and a new idea with this cohort. What's kind of your next plan? Because you seem to have most of it covered.
So my next plan is, I'd really like to get this into police college with the recruits. And so last week I went down to college to do a presentation to a bunch of managers, and so there's some conversation starting around the potential of putting this into college with the recruits, particularly in the family harm space. So we have one of the sergeants down there had been to some training, I think earlier in the week, last week, and we have a woman who is, I haven't seen her presentation, but I've heard lots and lots of amazing things about it from people who have. And so she is a woman who has her own story, really big story of being a victim of family harm. So part of the training that the recruits get is her telling her story. And apparently she talks a lot about the need for police to come in with the right attitude and the right approach. But the sergeant who'd gone down said, she's really amazing, and she talks about the mindset, but doesn't really talk about what that looks like. How do you do that approach? How do you show that attitude? And so he has talked to some people down there around the possibility of, she does her session and then I could come in and do a session on the SF stuff, which would be a bit more of a kind of a practical, this is what that kind of attitude and mindset would look like when you're talking to someone. So that's early discussion, but it looks like there's some promise in that. So that's my next big idea.
Yeah.
Amazing. We've actually got a question, Joe, from someone that I think you both know.
David
Haynes.
Oh, David, can you block him? He just asked horrible questions.
I will read it. Emma recently published a chapter in a new solution-focused book about working with young people. She now works mostly with adults. So I wonder, from her opinion, if there is any difference between using solution-focused with kids or with adults.
Well, you can get away with being a dick more with kids than with adults. Probably not. I mean, the language would be a bit different, and I'd probably do more kind of fun stuff with kids. But having said that, all kids are different, just like all adults are different. And I mean, I have kids. I still do work with children as well, but the essence of it is the same. And for me, the essence is that my job is to, when I'm talking to someone, I want to finish the conversation and go away, and they are left feeling more hopeful, more confident, more optimistic that they can achieve what they want to achieve. And the way I might go about that in terms of the wording of the questions might be different for adults and children, but I think the essence of it is the same for me. Yeah.
And I think I don't know, Aish would agree. We as you know, we work with families, and we find that younger people are more open to this way of working, because it takes away sort of blame and guilt and who's responsible for what, and they seem to have more of imagination, more of a way of that creativity. So they haven't sort of got this rigid mindset that you build up over years. So we found
it's interesting, because when I work with child offenders and kids, one of the things I was blown away by was so many of them did not have dreams, they just didn't have that imagination. I think a lot of them were very, very much part of very marginalised groups, and so they had a lot of deprivation and facing a whole bunch of challenges, and a lot of them hadn't even been out of their suburb. They hadn't even been to the beach. So you just, I think about my kids, they just wouldn't be able to relate to not having been to the beach or not having been over to a place that's 20 kilometres away. But these kids, and I remember, when we were kids, you had all these dreams about, when I grow up, I'm going to be this and I'm going to do that and all that sort of stuff. But so many of these kids just didn't have any concept of imaginations or dreams or big hopes and big goals. And so a big part of my job, I think, was helping them learn to imagine and dream and think about what's possible. And because I have always associated having big imaginations with children, and so it was real shock to find so many young people who just was like, there generations and generations of people just being so stuck and so in such horrible situations and really disadvantaged, that it was nice. It was sad, but at the end, it was nice to help these families see possibilities where they had just really not seen any possibilities.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no way I could have done that with CBT.
Yeah.
Just wouldn't happen.
And like you say, I guess a lot of the young people, would they have been in families where there was a kind of, I don't know, a history of conflict or criminality, I guess, if that's the right word, I'm not sure.
Yeah. When I started with police, I'd come from a job where I was a national advisory role, and so I was in the sort of flow of doing big reports and data reports and all that stuff. So when I started this job, I did keep some stats on, whether these kids were coming from families where there was criminal history or gang associations. And one of the things I looked at was family violence, and it was really interesting because I don't think it would be the same now because the systems have changed a bit. But I remember back then, I think like maybe 20% of the kids, they had reported family harm, like, so there were family harm records for that family. But so there's like quite a low percentage. But when you talk to families, 80 to 90% of them disclosed that there was violence. So there was a huge discrepancy between what was actually recorded and what they were saying. Yeah, this has happened. And a lot of the kids, it had been in those really early years, and maybe not so much now, but in those first couple of years, they'd been, one of the parents had been in a relationship where there was violence or there was a lot of verbal conflict and other kinds of trauma for kids.
So,
Yeah.
so when you actually spoke to families and built that kind of relationship, that's when that information came out. So you say almost 80% had sort of,
and probably over 80, probably nearer to 90.
wow.
Yeah, so it was staggering, and it was interesting because we kind of know that's a risk factor, a huge risk factor and stuff. But I think the thing about working with kids is kind of going on a sideline a bit, but there's a lot of empathy for kids, and your child offenders, people generally have a bit of compassion for because they're small and they're young and they're reasonably cute. But working with these people in custody, they're the same people. They're just grown up, and but somehow we lose our compassion and our empathy for them when they reach a certain age, or I don't know. But they're the same. They're the same stories, and if you do look back at their history, they're these kids but older, and they've still got that same hurt and that same those same deep stuff that they struggle with.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're doing amazing work, because obviously even if you can get some of these young people to have healthier relationships, and their children won't need to witness that violence, and hopefully, it's kind of in the long run, it's going to be massive.
Doesn't really feel like work. I love it so much, and so it doesn't feel like back in the day, before 2011, it felt like work because it was difficult. But because I wasn't really working with people. I was coming in as the expert, trying to do stuff to them, so to speak. So, but now it's because it's such a nice way. I think for police too, it really aligns with our values of respect and empathy and the idea of partnership, and really, really working in partnership with people. Yeah.
So tell us about the training that you do, Emma.
What training?
Do you
The
train?
stuff I deliver.
We've got one coming up, haven't we? Well, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. So that's another accident. So I never ever planned to do training because I honestly don't see myself as knowing anywhere near enough to teach other people. I mean, I certainly don't have the knowledge that a lot of our colleagues have and never will have. But I think when I first learnt the approach, one of the things that stood out to me was the whole power of hope and what difference that makes for people and how central that was to me. It sort of jumped out at me that even from that very first day about the difference that it makes for people. And I remember, I don't know if it was that day, but very soon after, I thought this would be great for suicide prevention. And my previous job had been in suicide bereavement. So suicide was an area I was kind of interested in anyway, but wasn't part of my role in police. But so I always thought, and because I guess because about the hope and about the simplicity, I'd always thought, wouldn't it be great if the whole world knew this and everyone knew how to not be a practitioner, but if everyone knew how to have these kind of conversations with people, no matter who they were. But I hate presenting. I absolutely hate presenting. But so that kind of put me off. And then a couple of years ago, a professional colleague, not within police, but a professional colleague I knew and had worked quite a bit with over the years, took his life, and that blew me away because if I had to almost line up everybody I knew in terms of most likely to least likely, he would be right down the least likely end. And I remember just being really devastated by that and really stuck on for me, I was stuck on the thought of how he must have felt when he made that decision how hopeless he must have felt and that sense of not being able to get through the situation that he had found himself in. And that kind of was the push I wouldn't say wanted, but it kind of pushed me to dabble in doing some workshops, I guess, primarily for just the public. And that's just kind of taken off, I think. Here with I mostly just do real basic workshops for the public around, I call it conversations that create hope. That's really around how do you, if you're worried about someone, and we have a lot of messaging around it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to say that you're struggling, but what do you do if someone says that to you? And so I guess for me, the other side of that coin is if someone in your family or a friend says that they're struggling, you really want to know how to respond to that, because our mental health services, well, any mental health services are really limited resources, and so they're only ever going to be there for the most at risk and the really acute stuff. And for the most part, people have to manage their loved ones or their friends in the community. And it's really scary for families if someone goes for an assessment and is told, just go home to your family, and it's really scary for the family to be worried about them and to be fearful of what do I say, what should I not say, am I going to say the wrong thing? And so for me, it's just really about helping reduce that fear and giving them just a little bit of confidence and some tools that they can use anytime, really. And I think the thing I like about this approach is it's a anytime, any place approach. I mean, I've had some conversations with people in the most random of places. I remember I'd gone down to Dunedin to do a workshop, and on the flight, one of the flights back, and I'm not really a person for small talk. Like, I'm not really socially confident enough to chit chat to people on the plane. But I was sitting next to a guy who I just could tell something wasn't right. I just seemed not happy, and so I broke tradition really and talked to him. And long story short, he was suicidal, and was going home to, unbeknownst to his family, kind of say goodbye to them. And so, if I'd been in my old life, I would have thought, oh, I haven't got my interview questions with me, so I can't really do anything. But you just kind of can easily slip into that conversation around, scaling and miracle questions and hopes and coping and all that stuff. And, he ended up messaging me a few times in the following month and is really doing really well. So, it's opportunities that I didn't expect that to happen when I hopped on the plane. I've had conversations with, a friend that I swim with, when we swimming up and down the pool, we're doing kick, and I'll be having ECF conversations with her about stuff that she's dealing with. And so you don't have to be in a counselling room or, in that role. It's just a way of talking to people, which I guess I do probably quite a naturalistic version of it, which means that it's quite transferable to everyday life. I mean, my kids have kind of endured it for the last 9 years, but I have heard them use it on their friends, so I know that they think it's all right.
I honestly think it's amazing, honestly.
Yeah, it's cool. It's just such a great. Just feel so lucky to have learnt it. I really do.
And like you said, when you're, it becomes a natural conversation. It's not an interrogation. It's not a list of questions. You're obviously you'll throw the odd one in there and then, but it sounds like it's again getting it out to the wider public. So it doesn't have to be professionals that come to your training. It could be anybody that's just wants to know a little bit more about it, and them going out into the community and maybe having those conversations of hope so that, like you say, with the waiting lists, I mean, especially in London now, young people are waiting a year for a service.
Wow.
So it sounds like what you're doing is early prevention again. It's almost having those conversations in the community so that they don't need to end up on this waiting list. Do you know what I mean?
And
It's
it's
almost.
really cool.
Hmm.
It's cool because every time I've done one, I get really cool stories back from people who, I guess my thing is, we've all been to training over the years where you sit there for 6 hours and you hear how bad the problem is and you leave and you have a headache, but you don't know what to do about. So you feel more demoralized than when you went in.
Yeah.
And so my thing is, you have to be able to leave a training and be able to do something straight away if you need to. Otherwise, I've done a crap job, I think, if people don't go away being able to, with some practical tools. And one of the coolest stories I got was from a woman who, I think she was a midwife, as it turned out, and she had been, so I think we did the training on a Monday night, perhaps, and she emailed me on the Wednesday and said that she'd had a woman come to see her who was pregnant, obviously, and they thought she might have a pulmonary embolism. So she's really unwell, high blood pressure, high heart rate, all that stuff. And so obviously she was hooked up to blood pressure monitors and heart rate monitors and the works. And she wasn't suicidal, but she was really, really distressed and in a really bad space, physically and emotionally. And so this woman, this midwife, thought, I'll just try asking some of those questions. And so she just asked her the miracle question. And it was so cool because I would never know this because I don't work in a hospital and I don't strap my families up to monitors. But she said, she asked her the miracle question. And as she started answering, like her blood pressure and her heart rate just started coming down. And that was before I knew any of the neuroscience stuff, but it was like, wow, how cool is that to get that feedback that it actually has an effect on someone's physiology. So that was like such a cool story to get back from someone who just felt confident enough to give it a try. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So are your trainings online now, Emma, that we're all in lockdown?
Yeah, they probably will. It's hard doing it online because I like the interaction with people.
We're going to have to
I have
New Zealand.
Yeah. So, but we yeah, I will be doing more online. It's just trying to find the time and yeah, but definitely I have done a couple, so I want to do more of it. But the cool thing is I've got people now who just everyday people who have, even some of the families I've worked with as parents, the parents, because a lot of what I do is kind of equip the parents to have these conversations with their kids rather than me being the person who does it. And I've had parents say, that they really, really, really like the approach and they've gone on to use it to support their friends. Had an email from a parent a few weeks ago and they said, I think if I hadn't learnt this approach through me helping their child, she said, I think at least one of my friends would be dead and one probably would have had her kids taken off her and one would be in and out of the mental health unit. And so it's so cool. And she's a pretty amazing parent anyway, so I probably didn't really do that much for her, but just gave her a little bit of extra knowledge and skill, but she's been able to go and pay it forward, I guess, to the people around her and support them through hard times. So that's really nice.
Wow. You'll have the whole of New Zealand having solution-focused conversations one day.
Oh, hopefully. That's the next step.
Yeah.
Well, one Emma Rigby who has been watching. She's from New Zealand, and the first thing she wrote on the comments is, "I love her accent," and she lives in Enfield. So I love her accent, and then she went on to say, "Thank you for sharing the topic." And yeah, Emma misses home. So hearing you is just is brilliant for her. Sorry,
Oh,
Emma.
cool.
Yeah.
But I always feel very inspired when I listen to you talk, Emma, and even kind of following you on social media is quite inspiring. And I know that you're probably going to say something like, "Well, no, it's not really much," but actually, it really is. And I think you're such a giving person with the information that you have and the practice, and the stories are absolutely amazing. And from each story that you tell, we're learning something new, and it's kind of sparking things in my head. Oh my God, we could do this, we could do that. So you're kind of training us even now without even realizing. And you do it in such a wonderful, and it looks easy. It looks like what you're doing is really, really easy. You're doing it without even putting any thought into it. It just comes naturally to you. I want to know about your swimming. Because
that's one thing that's not an accident. So although you could argue that I wouldn't have got back into it if I hadn't learned TCF. So I swam competitively when I was young. So I gave up when I was about 17, and so that was a lot of years ago, and never ever planned to get back into it. My swimming career was done, and then maybe 27 years later, I just went through some really yucky stuff in life and went for a swim. I just thought I'll go for a swim, and it kind of became my way of getting through some hard stuff. And then a friend of mine who, at that point, she owned the gym and the pool here, sent me a list of competitions, like events to go and compete in. And I just did one for a laugh, really, more than anything else. And have done it ever since. And so, yeah, I often swim along, having ECF conversations with myself. Yeah. So it's just for me, I guess it's a combination. It's a fitness thing. I like competing, although there's nothing really happening at the moment. But it's my mental downtime as well. It's kind of my well-being thing, because it's when my brain turns off. So yeah, and it's been cool too, because when I got back into the competing side of it, it meant that we were going away around the country for different events, and so I was taking the kids away for holidays, and yeah, they had to be bored rigid at the pool for a day or so, but they also, it was a few days holiday, and we weren't really doing that before, so it gave us some nice family time and some trips away. I took a couple of them to Aussie with me a couple of years ago for an event. So yeah, just something I really love and am passionate about. So yeah.
Emma, it's been amazing. I'll tell you what I'm taking away from this. One thing that came up at the SF conference, I think at the final plenary, was this idea that solution focus can't really work with complex issues. It's only really for very sort of, on the surface kind of things, or a little bit of confidence building. But you're working with clients almost at the extreme end. Do you know what I mean? That are incarcerated, families with violence, people contemplating suicide. So that's, for me, that's inspirational in itself. You're crazy because you get this idea and you go with it, which I love, which is fantastic. But yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aish?
Yeah, I always say Emma's absolutely amazing. I'm a huge fan of Emma's work. She doesn't even know that I'm a bit of a stalker for Emma, because I learned so much. I learned so much. So, and I was
You should come to New Zealand and stalk me firsthand.
You keep saying that. One day I'm just going to knock on your door.
No.
With Emma Rigby, who knows her way around. I said, right, we need to find Emma.
Oh,
Burns.
excellent. Perfect.
There you go. I've got to take her with us. But yeah, you're absolutely amazing. And so tonight we're actually interviewing Pamela.
Yeah.
Pamela's on tonight, 7 p.m. UK time. And as Emma knows, I'm so rubbish with times. Emma, what time? What time is that in New Zealand?
6 a.m. So we're 11 hours ahead of you at the moment.
Right. So the next suicide the training, the online training, because I know there's a lot of people in the UK that are interested. Right. That starts 6 p.m. your time, and I'm going to share it again now. That
That's
starts.
just that's not really training. That's just casual conversation.
It's a conversation.
But David, that's with David. David's amazing. David is just
He's all right.
such a cool person. He's such a neat person, and he's just full of wisdom, and he's a nice counterbalance to my raving on. He's like sort of quite calm and knowledgeable. Then I'm this raving idiot in the other corner who just rambles on about stories.
No, it's fine. You're the equivalent to Joe and I. Joe is
So
like that.
I'm looking forward to that. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be brilliant. When is that? What date is that?
That's on the 10th of September. So that's World Suicide Prevention Day. It's just going to be on Facebook Live. So on my Connecting with Hope page.
Yeah, I'm going. I will be. I have shared it, and I know quite a lot of people are interested. But I'm going to keep sharing it and remind people when it starts. Because I think, I'm definitely looking forward to that one. So thank you so much. Can I just ask that you wait there, don't go anywhere, and everybody else, we'll see you later on.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.